How to get your ex back? Okay. Other questions that connect to this are, how do you make an ex miss you? How can I make my ex regret losing me? And so when questions like this come up, this is where we want to start looking at what is the vibratory quality with which I'm holding this desire, right? Because when we ask questions like, how do I make them miss me? How can I make them regret losing me? We're usually struggling with deep feelings of yearning, feelings of helplessness, like we've lost control of this situation. And usually underneath that, there are feelings of grief, fear, right? Attachment that stem from attachment anxiety. And so that desire to influence our ex's emotions really stems from feeling disconnected from them and maybe disconnected from ourselves as a result of it. And so we're kind of scrambling to feel powerful again, to feel like we're in control of ourselves and our lives again. And we're trying to validate our sense of identity and esteem. And of course, this is not the type of energetic or emotional vibe that is likely to inspire someone to want to reconnect with you. So if we really want to, in earnest, petition our ex to give it a try again, we want to balance our approach with practical, but also respectful approaches, right? Respectful means. And so we want to make sure that we have, maybe we tweak the question a little bit, which is more like, what are the thoughtful steps I can take to responsibly approach my ex and explore the possibility of rekindling our relationship? So I want to kind of dig into first what might be some of the productive and the unproductive reasons that we might want an ex back, and then just dip into 4 things that I think we should be mindful of if we want to pursue that, right? So the first thing, let's take a look at some, let's say, more productive or healthy reasons for wanting your ex back. Since you broke up, have you gone through a process of self-awareness and self-evaluation after the breakup? You see and perceive an opportunity here to evolve and develop a better understanding of your partner and of the relationship because you have evolved and developed a better understanding of yourself. And you believe in earnest that these deeper understandings and insights could transform the dynamics of a previous relationship. Secondly, do you feel as though there is unresolved potential? Now, I'm someone who usually says, don't go chasing after unexpressed potential. But let's say we've gone through this process of taking a self inventory and deep self evaluation. Sometimes there can be external circumstances or issues of timing beyond our control that contribute to a breakup. And so when and if we arrive at a place where we're able to put those pressures and those context dependent issues aside, we may realize that there was some potential for that relationship to blossom, and that potential still exists now in a new context. And maybe it makes you wonder, well, is it worth trying it out again? So I believe that if both parties have matured and some of those unavoidable context-dependent issues are no longer present, and the core reasons for your initial connection are still strong, then it can be a path worth exploring. Thirdly, is there genuine love and compatibility here? So when we want to reconnect with an ex, we don't want it to be from a place of seeking relief, right? From a place of, I just don't want to feel this pain anymore, and so I want to be with them so I don't feel pain anymore. Okay, we want it to be from a place of sovereignly and decidedly choosing someone because we perceive them as being compatible on the level of not just emotional upliftment and physical chemistry, but also that you have the same values and priorities in the long term. You have similar vision for the ways in which you'd like to structure your lives in the day in and the day out. And communication kind of factors into this. So if the breakup was more about misunderstandings or defensive communications rather than actual fundamental incompatibilities with things like values and priorities, then I think the relationship could be exhumed. Now let's talk a little bit about the unhealthy, or let's call them the unproductive reasons for wanting our ex back. So, we often yearn for what it is that we have lost, but not every urge to get it back necessarily comes from a place that is intrinsically healthy. Right. So one of those places that might work against us is when we are operating from a fear of being alone. So when we want to unite with someone out of a fear of loneliness, this can lead us into codependent dynamics that are really more about relief and comfort than they are about genuine connection. And that's kind of a fear-based vibration and approach that compels us to overlook deeper issues that may have led to the breakup in the first place. And when we do that, we risk repeating the same patterns that led to that breakup in the first place. Then sometimes there's also an element of ego or validation seeking that comes into play. So when we want an ex back, sometimes it's just because our pride was wounded and we want them back because it's a boost to our self-esteem, or as if we are proving something to ourselves or to others, that maybe we're worried about what people think or things like that. And so this kind of turns our relationships and the people in them into kind of making them more objectified, as if we're treating the relationship status as some kind of material definition of identity and who we are, or we treat a partner like they're some kind of trophy or something like that, rather than really sourcing your connection from the heart. The other thing that can sometimes pop up is that once the relationship ends, our attachment anxieties turn on, and then we slip into nostalgia. And we start idealizing the past, idealizing our partner, idealizing the relationship, and we start painting this rosier picture of what went on. And so now we're sort of obsessing over returning to this idealized version of something that actually never existed. We're kind of chasing this illusion based on a selective memory that is really ignoring the real underlying issues and differences that led to the breakup. Okay, so now that we have taken a look at what might be the productive or the unproductive reasons for getting an ex back, let's say we've adopted the attitude of the three more helpful, healthy, and productive reasons. So let's say that's where you're coming from. So let's take a look at four, I think, important aspects, elements, or steps, let's call them, that are really going to contribute to the success of that endeavor. Okay, so let's dive into these with a little bit more detail. And so the first one is we want to improve your communication skills based on an understanding of attachment styles. There's the 4 attachment styles. So we have fearful avoidance or disorganized attachment style, whom I call spice of lifers. And these are individuals that typically crave closeness, but also fear it, right? So they can exhibit inconsistent communication patterns. Sometimes they alternate between being close and pulling away. Sometimes they can respond defensively or with confusion in emotionally charged situations, and they're usually torn between a desire for intimacy but a fear of getting hurt. Then we have our dismissive avoidant attachment individuals, whom I refer to as rolling stones. These are individuals that value their independence highly and sometimes come across as a bit aloof or detached in relationships. Sometimes they avoid deep emotional conversations, or they may shut down when they're pressed for emotional intimacy. And they tend to express their needs and their emotions in very independent and self-sufficient ways to avoid too much vulnerability. Then we have anxious attachment style, sometimes called anxious preoccupied attachment style, and I call these folks open hearts. And these individuals tend to worry a lot about their partners and their ability to receive reciprocal love in relationships. Sometimes they communicate in a way that might be validation seeking, requiring a lot of reassurance. They can have difficulty maintaining a sense of calm in relationships because they're afraid of rejection or abandonment. They're rejection sensitive. They can express their needs and their emotions, sometimes in a heightened or charged way. Sometimes they can be very verbose and use a lot of words to fill up silences or as a way of seeking reassurance. And in communication, that can be overwhelming for their partners. Then we have secure attachment styles. So these are the individuals that are typically comfortable with intimacy and they are warm and loving. They are likely to communicate in a more clear, direct, and consistent way. They tend to express their needs and their wants more effectively because they don't take things so personally. They're less defensive in communication, and they usually have an air of understanding and empathy when it comes to their partner. So they're a little more balanced when it comes to things like conflict and repair. And so they're not overly dependent, but they're not too detached. They're in that interdependent place. So understanding these different attachment styles can help us understand how they may approach communication. Because when we have a certain attachment style, we have a certain way of interpreting people's words, their actions, their behaviors, the way they carry themselves. And then we tell ourselves a narrative about what it means. And then we respond to the narrative. So when we understand what are some of the underlying narratives going on, then we can have a better sense of how to approach someone, taking their perspective into consideration. So if you want to learn more about that, I encourage you to check out my course, The Courageous Communicator. And again, I'll leave a link to that in the replay. Now, the second step, we talked about demonstrating personal responsibility. So if you want an ex back, you definitely want to demonstrate that you are taking responsibility for your part in the breakup and in any of the dynamics that might have led up to that breakup. So this really requires a willingness to set aside our pride and take in genuine accountability for our part in the rupture so that we can transform our approach to reconciliation. This really involves taking that personal inventory, so spending some time alone and honestly reflecting on your own actions and behaviors and their impact on the relationship. And that means going beyond surface level issues and really digging into, why did I really do that? What was I needing? What was I asking for? And so then once you identify your contributions to that dynamic, you have to openly acknowledge them. Now, it's not about blaming yourself for everything. Maybe the dynamic you have to dig into is a habit of taking on too much, of blaming yourself for everything, of taking on the fault for everyone and everything. And that's the thing that you need to dig into, right? So your task then is recognizing when it's not mine to take on. So it's not about self-blame. It's just recognizing what's our part and whatever that looks like. Then once you've taken responsibility and you've articulated it, now you're going to apologize. And you want to make sure it's a genuine apology. So you want to do it in a thoughtful and considerate manner, in a time and in a way that respects their boundaries and where they might be on their path of healing. It should be an apology that is devoid of expectation. You're not apologizing because you're expecting them to forgive you. You're not apologizing because you think that that's going to make them take you back. And you want to be specific about what you're apologizing for. I'm sorry for everything does not cut it, because it does not convey understanding and it does not convey that you're sincere. It conveys you're seeking relief. So instead, you want to articulate what were the specific actions that you now recognize as your contribution to what happened, and express that you regret them and why, and how you're going to change, right? How you're going to do it differently. Number 3, we would need to rebuild trust and respect through consistency and coherence. Here's a few signs of consistency in a relationship. So they follow through on their promises. And so they're demonstrating reliability there. They have predictable reactions to stress. So they handle stress and conflict in predictable and non-destructive ways. Consistency also speaks to having open and honest communication, that you can trust that even if they're not able to communicate it right now, that they will come back and they will address it later. And you're able to make plans. You're able to share your feelings consistently, and you can avoid surprises that lead to distrust. Also, that there's a steady effort being expressed in the relationship, because relationships, they require maintenance, right? So consistently making an effort to nurture the relationship, showing that you have a real commitment to this being an ongoing thing, not just a Band-Aid to every crisis that pops up. And of course, respecting boundaries. So recognizing and respecting each other's boundaries, which reinforces that sense of safety and trust, and like you care about the needs that those boundaries express. Now that's consistency. What's coherence? So as I said before, coherence overlaps with consistency, but it's a little bit different. You might also consistently act the part of a partner, but then you refuse to claim the status or the label, right? So that can create doubt or distrust and a sense of instability in the relationship, especially if your partner senses that you have a resistance to claiming them with your love. It also creates feelings of anxiety and confusion, because relationship labels help them to know what they can expect and if they can rely on you in the future as opposed to moment to moment. So coherence is really more about, I love you and I am consistently acting on that love, and I'm claiming it. I'm stating it. I am articulating it out loud. Actually, I'd love to know in the comments if anyone's ever experienced that, where you have someone who seems really into you, but they won't say it, or they have someone who says they're really into you, but then they act a different way. And then let's take a look at the last step, step 4, willingness to face your future growth challenges together. So if you want your ex back and you are in pursuit of a real commitment with them, it's not about just rekindling that romance, but it's also about a willingness to face future challenges together with an openness and a willingness to repair. So that starts by understanding the growth challenges that exist for your partners on the individual level, but also on the level of attachment styles, because attachment styles can also, in many ways, define what our challenges are to opening up in love. So, for example, folks that have anxious attachment style are challenged to assume more personal authority while rejecting taking on what is not their responsibility. So if a partner can support them in this, then the result is for them, a sense of increased personal agency and independence and self-esteem, and they may begin to cultivate their own well-defined boundaries. Now, for individuals that have more of an avoidant attachment, for example, they're usually challenged to allow someone to participate, to contribute to, and enhance their emotional experiences. So if they can meet that challenge, then the result is they have a reduced hypersensitivity to fears of inadequacy. They have an increased ability to access a full emotional range. And now they have more flexible boundaries. And for individuals with a disorganized attachment or fearful avoidance, their growth challenges really begin with a practice of self-compassion and building up that sense of self, that sense of trust in their own agency and esteem. There's some skill building involved here. And so the result is they also experience reduced hypersensitivity to others, yes, but primarily to their own inner critic. Because for the fearful avoidant partner, these are the folks that are, let's say, they struggle the most with letting love in once it shows up, right? So we can have the partner, the conditions, the environment, everything is curated just so. But now there is the issue of letting it in. And fearful avoidant folks probably struggle the most with that. And it's because they have an internalized inner critic. And so their primary growth challenge is working with that inner critic in the inner space, which will allow them to relax and soften and open up and allow love in and trust that they deserve it, right? And that gives them the chance to experience more emotional stability inside and then more emotional stability in the relationship. So those are the 4 steps that I would recommend. And if you feel like communication had something to do with the breakup, I'd recommend my course, The Courageous Communicator, because it's going to walk you through my 3-step HIP communication formula, which is heal, inspire, and practice. And it's going to walk you through how you're going to be able to utilize the knowledge of attachment styles to connect more deeply with your partner. It has a lot of experiential exercises and practices to connect you, not just to the words you're using, but to the energy that exists behind them. There may be parts of you that are feeling resentful or grieving the loss. It's also connecting to the parts that feel unsafe and releasing that energy so that our words land differently because we are speaking them from a different, what I'm going to call vibratory place. I hope that that was helpful. If any of that stands out to you, I'd love to know in the chat box in the caption there. Also, remember to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. I put out videos once a week and I wouldn't want you to miss out.